For years, people in America thought Michael Landon was the perfect dad on TV, a nice guy who loved his family and believed in God. But behind his smile was a totally different life. He would disappear from home at night. Strange boxes would show up at his beach house. There were hidden photos and parties with people nobody knew. After staying quiet for almost 40 years, his son Michael Landon Jr. finally told everything. In an interview that shocked Hollywood, he said one sentence that made everyone freeze. "People praised my father for being kind, but he lived his whole life lying just to stay alive." That sentence opened the door to the dark secrets of a famous man, a place where TV cameras never showed. And now let's go back to the years 1978 to 1983, where the real story started and America's perfect TV dad first showed who he really was. One, my father never truly loved my mother because he never really loved any woman at all. Michael Landon Jr.'s voice got quiet when he said those words in a special interview with Vanity Fair magazine in Los Angeles. The room went silent. Yellow light shined on the face of a man in his 60s. His eyes were red but burning with something painful and freeing, like he was finally saying the truth Hollywood had hidden for years. "He wasn't a cheating husband," Michael said slowly. "He was a man who had to lie about himself just to survive." He remembered Beverly Hills in the late 1970s. The Landon house, people called it the happiest home in America, was always bright but never felt warm inside. In the living room, family photos hung on the walls. Each picture frame was a little crooked, like someone didn't want to fix them. That house always felt cold, Michael remembered. Even when Mom cooked his favorite food, steak and mashed potatoes, he never sat down to eat with us. He remembered his birthday in 1980. The cake just sat there. The candles burned out, and his father still hadn't come home. I waited. Mom tried to smile and said he was busy with work, but I saw tears falling into her wine glass. Close to midnight, the door finally opened. Landon walked in smelling like strange cologne. He patted his son's shoulder. "Happy birthday, champ." Then he went straight upstairs. No present, no hug. I thought he was just tired. Later, I realized he was somewhere else, his body and his mind. While regular people loved him as America's dad on the cover of People magazine, another rumor quietly spread behind the scenes at NBC. Michael Landon had a special friendship with a photographer named Eli Rosen, a young man who was always by his side on the Little House on the Prairie set. Eli wasn't just his photographer, an old lighting worker remembered. He was like his shadow. They ate together, left the set together, always whispering to each other. Then came the big scandal. In July 1979, while filming in Utah, both men were seen leaving their hotel early in the morning wearing matching bathrobes. A hotel cleaner later said they looked like two people who had just woken up after a long night together. NBC immediately held a secret meeting. Days later, Landon suddenly showed up with a new person beside him, an 18-year-old makeup artist named Cindy Clerico. The next day, Variety newspaper printed their photo holding hands outside a fancy restaurant. Michael Landon's new love lights up Hollywood. Everyone understood this was a cover-up, but regular people believed it. It was easier to believe. "My father knew how to act even when cameras weren't rolling," Michael Jr. said. "He kissed her for the cameras like a man trying to prove something, not a man really in love." When Cindy got pregnant in late 1982, Michael Jr., who was 19 then, started to hope. "I thought maybe he'd changed. He came home earlier. Sometimes he even smiled." His mother, Lynn No, had already moved out. She chose to stay quiet to protect her kids. The news media called Cindy Michael's new love, and NBC celebrated it as the comeback of America's favorite dad. But soon Michael Jr. saw through it all. One night in early 1983, he came home early and heard his father whispering into the phone, "Don't call again, we can't keep doing this." He didn't hear the name, but deep down, he knew it wasn't Cindy. Weeks later, Landon announced he was going to marry Cindy Clerico. The wedding happened really quickly on Valentine's Day 1983 on a white beach in Malibu. Only certain reporters were invited, all from NBC. The Los Angeles Times headline said, "Michael Landon, love returns after the storm." America felt relieved. But in Michael J.R.'s diary, written in shaky teenage handwriting, there was only one line. He didn't marry for love, he married because he was scared. Scared the truth would come out. That truth, Michael later said, wasn't about cheating. It was something Hollywood back then could never accept. A famous and powerful man whose heart didn't match the character he played on TV. I do. Didn't blame him for who he was, Michael said, his voice shaking. I blame him for lying to all of us just to protect his image. After the wedding, everything got worse. He became distant, angry, and drank more alcohol. When Cindy showed up on set, Landon's smile lit up the room. At home, he stayed quiet for hours. No family dinners, no Christmas, no birthdays. One year, I made him a Christmas card by hand, Michael said. He left it unopened on the table and drove away. I watched from the window and saw his face in the car lights. I knew we had nothing left to say to each other. For NBC, the marriage was perfect publicity. They launched a big campaign for his show Highway to Heaven, showing Landon as a symbol of faith and family. But inside the studios, people kept whispering. A crew member told the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner newspaper in 1985. He'd sit in the makeup room for hours staring at himself in the mirror. When Cindy called, he smiled, but his eyes looked empty. As Michael Jr. grew older, he began to understand. My father lived in a time when someone like him couldn't be himself. He said he chose to hide, to lie, and in the end, he lost everything, including us. Years later, when his mother Lynn died, Michael found a letter in her drawer. In her pretty handwriting, "You married that girl to protect your image, not your heart." He read it over and over, then smiled sadly. She knew everything but never said a word. She kept his image alive for us. Now at 60 years old, Michael doesn't feel angry anymore, only sad. Sometimes I rewatch Little House on the Prairie and see my father's smile. It's beautiful but strangely sad. I once thought he was the strongest man alive, he said, but maybe he was just the loneliest. He looked straight into the camera, his voice calm but strong. I'm not telling this to destroy him. I'm telling it so people understand that behind Hollywood's perfection, there's often a real human being quietly falling apart. Then he smiled a little and whispered. He ran from himself his whole life, but in the end the truth still found him. And that was only the beginning, because what came next was even darker. The secret that kept Michael Jr. silent for over 40 years. The truth that forever broke the myth of America's perfect father. That wasn't my father anymore, it was someone else. Someone living in the shadows, drinking from bottles and surrounded by smoke, forgetting who he was, Michael said in a rough voice, staring out the window. I used to think he was just lonely after the divorce, but no, he had stepped into a world I never imagined. After leaving Lino, Michael Landon moved from his happy Beverly Hills home to a new mansion in Malibu, fancy but empty, facing the Pacific Ocean. Jazz music always played softly at night, covering up the sound of the waves. Those nights smelled like alcohol, cigarettes, and something sweet and chemical, Michael remembered. He barely came home, and when he did, he walked past me like I wasn't even there. He smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day and drank like it was water. Every night, his office filled with smoke. Sometimes black bags arrived at the door. The delivery guys never talked, just nodded and left. Michael said, once I opened one out of curiosity, and what I saw wasn't a movie script like he said it was. That night, Michael walked downstairs. The lamp light glowed on his father's face. On the table, an ashtray, a glass tray, gray powder. Landon brushed it together with his fingers and breathed it in deeply. His eyes got wide with a strange look. I froze. He looked at me, not angry, not ashamed, just cold, and said, "Adult stuff, never touch it." Then he turned away like I wasn't there. That's when I knew I'd lost him. After that, metal cases were delivered more often. Nobody opened them. The delivery men left notes that just said hours. Late-night phone calls echoed through the house. Just deliver it to Studio City. No one must know, Michael heard. The Malibu mansion became a hiding place for strangers, men in dark suits and sunglasses even inside the house. Women who looked like they came from nightclubs, jazz music, clinking glasses, smoke as thick as fog. None of them ever really smiled. Michael said it felt like they came to hide, not to celebrate. Someone whispered they were Hollywood's underground circle, using small movie projects to hide money. Landon's name was used to make it look good. Sometimes Michael sneaked downstairs and watched from the dark hallway. His father stood in the colored lights and smoke, laughing, drinking with his arms around men and women. Once I saw him kiss someone through the smoke. I couldn't see the face, but the hands weren't a woman's. The teenage boy turned away, heartbroken by what he'd seen. In the rare mornings when he was sober, Landon seemed lost. When Michael visited, his father smiled a little. The smell of alcohol and cigarettes filled TH. These air. Do you hear the waves, son? He asked softly. I hear them even when I close my eyes. Michael said in those moments, his father looked like a man trapped by his own life. One night in 1986, Michael came without calling first. The office door was open a little. His father was slumped in a chair, surrounded by crumpled foil and glass tubes. White stuff sparkled on the desk. I shook him, but he just whispered, I'm fine, just need a little energy. I wanted to scream, but couldn't. From then on, Landon got worse. He couldn't sleep. He talked to himself. He thought the walls were spying on him. Once Michael saw him burning old photos from Bonanza and Little House and mumbling, so they'll have nothing to use against me. Rumors spread. The National Enquirer newspaper quoted neighbors. Unmarked cars come at midnight. Strange people go in and out. NBC stayed silent, but people on the inside knew Landon was in deep trouble. A producer once said, Michael wasn't evil, just surrounded by the wrong kind of powerful people. For Michael Jr., the worst pain wasn't losing his father, it was being forgotten by him. Whenever I called, he'd ask, which Michael? His voice shook. I lost him many times, not when he died, but during those nights. By 1988, Landon's body started to fail. He coughed all the time, he looked pale and hollow-eyed, but he still drank, still smoked. One morning, Michael found him sitting on the steps, staring at the ocean. A melted glass of whiskey sat beside him and an old photo of him and Cindy. He asked me, do you think I ever loved anyone? I didn't answer because in his eyes, I saw he didn't believe in love anymore. Those Malibu nights became symbols of a fading legend. Colored lights flickered, waves crashed, and the rough cough of a man once called a hero echoed through the dark. The world called him a hero, Michael said, but I only remember a man alone in smoke beside stains that never went away. He stopped, his voice breaking. They said he died from illness, but I know he'd been dying for years between the bottles, the smoke, and the nights no one dares talk about. And it was in one of those dark nights that something happened. An event that would make Hollywood see Michael Landon in a way it never had before. 3. In his world, a smile was the command and silence was the rule. Michael Landon Jr. remembered it, his voice shaking like every memory still scared him. I once sat watching him film a scene where he hugged a daughter on Little House on the Prairie. Then he turned away and threw a glass at the wall just minutes later. At the NBC studio, nobody knew what mood Michael Landon would be in that day. Some days he showed up early, laughing, patting people on the back, telling old Bonanza stories that made the whole crew laugh. He joked with Melissa Gilbert, the girl who played Laura, calling her my sunshine and promising a horseback ride after they finished filming. When he was happy, he was the best person in the world, a crew member told TV Guide magazine in 1993. But one sip of alcohol and he could turn into someone else completely. And that was true. Some mornings he walked onto the set with a gray face, his shirt buttons undone, and a drink still in his hand. The stage went silent, his rough voice carried across the room. "I want the light shining straight into that girl's eyes, understood?" Then he slammed the script down, nobody argued. From the camera guy to the lowest worker, everyone worked like they were walking on broken glass. "We never knew when he'd explode," said Tom Reynolds, a longtime camera operator. "One minute he was laughing. The next, he'd smash a $25,000 camera because the light didn't match the mood he wanted." The pressure wasn't just about making things perfect. Everyone knew Landon drank alcohol on set, though they pretended not to notice. "That travel mug he always carried wasn't coffee," a lighting worker said. "The whiskey smell was strong enough that anyone near him could tell." Many times while shooting emotional scenes, he cried for real, his hands shaking from the alcohol. His feelings then were true, Michael Jr. said, but not for the scene, for his own pain. Landon's acting slowly became an open secret nobody dared talk about. He directed, wrote, and starred in the show, and the whole operation depended on his moods. Some days he laughed and pulled everyone in for photos. The next day, he yelled at those same people over a tiny mistake. I once watched him stare down an actress with only 2 lines and bark. "You act like you've never lost anyone in your life," someone remembered. The breaking point came when Cindy Clarico, his young girlfriend, was brought into the company as his personal makeup artist. She was just 18, pretty, quiet, and always at his side whenever he showed up. He believed she understood him better than anyone, a crew member said. But the special treatment made the air feel heavy. Cindy had the right to touch the women's costumes, and nobody dared stop her, Melissa Gilbert wrote later in her book. And Michael treated her like a second director. Older actresses started avoiding him. One said bluntly, "You can't work with a man who's both drunk and jealous." Indeed, if anyone talked with Cindy a bit too long, Landon would cut the filming, shout, then change everything himself. "He looked at them with the eyes of someone who couldn't control his temper," Reynolds said. "We didn't know if it was jealousy or the drink, probably both." In those days, the Little House on the Prairie set, the place viewers believed showed family love, was actually cold and full of fear. Nobody dared speak loudly. Whenever Landon walked in, the air froze. "We filmed like we were crossing a battlefield," a sound worker said. If he frowned, the whole stage held its breath. Sometimes Michael Jr. was allowed by his mother to visit his father at work. "I remember the first time stepping onto the stage," he said. "He was giving orders, his voice sharp and clear. Everyone called him Pa. I looked around. Everyone feared him and still called him that, not out of respect but fear." When the day ended, Michael Jr. ran up, "Dad," but Landon only looked over, nodded like he was greeting a fan he didn't know, then turned away. "I stood there among people who called him Pa, while I was the only actual child who didn't get to say Dad." By the late 1970s, Landon was easier to set off. People remembered him sitting in his car for hours, refusing to come on set. And when he finally did, he brought a half-empty bottle. Once during a sunset scene, clouds changed the light and he smashed a reflector in anger. "I won't shoot under a fake sky." Then he stormed off, leaving the crew waiting. In NBC meetings, he was just as unpredictable, smooth one moment, slamming the table the next, demanding total creative control. "Michael was brilliant but self-destructive," a producer said. "He wanted control over everything, light, dialogue, even other people's feelings." The stress drove people away. One of Little House's longest-working writers wrote in a journal, "We don't recognize him anymore. Maybe the spotlight burned his true self to ashes." For Michael Jr., those days were mixed with amazement and fear. "I saw my father on screen, gentle, generous, teaching about faith, but off camera he was just a tired man with a glass in his hand and empty eyes." He remembered his father once telling him, "If you want to make movies, learn to lie." In this business, the honest ones fall first. Michael Jr. said he never forgot it. It made me realize my father was no longer an artist. He was just surviving by pretending. By 1983, when Little House on the Prairie ended, the crew seemed to breathe with relief. We loved him, but we feared him, Melissa Gilbert admitted later. Every time he smiled on screen, I asked myself, is it real? As for Michael Jr., he sat in the bleachers watching his father's final shot, hugging a daughter in a golden field at sunset. Everyone clapped. My eyes just stung, he said, because I knew that gentle father only existed on screen. My real dad had been gone a long time. And when the stage lights went dark, what remained was not applause, but the cold gap between fame and loneliness. A space Michael Landon never escaped. People think my father died of illness, but really he died of something sweeter and more dangerous than smoke and drink. Power. Michael Landon Jr. spoke slowly, his voice dropping like he was confessing his family's past. When my father started moving among public figures, he thought he was doing something great. Nobody knew the light he chased was the same flame that burned him. After Highway to Heaven's huge success, Michael Landon became the face of American faith. His speeches were quoted. Photos of him raising an arm beside the flag appeared in Life magazine. In 1987, he started showing up at California party fundraisers, standing next to powerful people and donors at the Beverly Hills Hotel. The Los Angeles Times wrote, Michael Landon, flag bearer for values and family. But behind that glow, another show was being directed, sharper than any TV show he ever made. According to a former personal assistant, Richard Halper, a fake name, Landon didn't go to those parties just to speak. He came to make deals, Halper said. The handshakes happened in the shadows, not about art but money, a lot of money. At private evenings in Los Angeles and Washington, money people saw Landon as the perfect bridge between the screen and the government. They needed a clean image to make the money flow look legitimate, Halper said. And Michael was perfect, moral on the outside, a strong voice, always talking about family and faith. He used his reputation to pitch educational projects about national values. But in reality, many promises came from companies rumored to be under investigation for moving money through the independent movie market. A newspaper in 1990 hinted that Landon took unclear contributions worth millions. He stayed quiet, even showed up at more events, standing with some well-known figures in the Capitol. My father once said, nobody in public life is spotless, only the hiding differs, Michael Jr. remembered. When I heard that, I knew he wasn't a filmmaker anymore, he'd become a brand. The deeper he went into power, the stranger he felt to himself. No longer the sensitive artist from Little House, he was a programmed speaker. Every line was prepared. Family is this country's foundation. Faith is the compass. A father must be the pillar. It all sounded perfect, until anyone who knew him outside the camera realized they were the emptiest words he'd ever spoken. Michael Jr. said that in 1989, on his first trip with his father to the Capitol, he watched him sit at a table full of strangers. Everyone laughed and clinked glasses, but nobody looked each other in the eyes. My father sat among them, smiling like he'd forgotten who he was smiling at. After the dinner, Michael Jr. heard a phone call between his father and a man with a coastal accent. Let them think I'm doing it for family, his father said quietly, as long as the transfers land in the right place. That sentence kept Michael Jr. quiet for years. I thought he was just an artist. Turns out he knew how to bargain with his glow, he said later in an imagined interview in 2025. By the end of the 1980s, Landon seemed convinced he could stand above everything: Hollywood, public life, the audience. He started talking about running for state office and planned a youth film foundation backed by donors from the energy business. But old whispers about his private life, the drinking and shady dealings came back. A few reporters quietly gathered notes about late-night arrangements at his Malibu home. The more he tried to prove he was spotless, the more people doubted him, Michael said. He didn't understand that people forgive those who fall and those who cheat, but never the ones who fake being saints. Then in 1991, the news broke that Michael Landon had a serious illness. The press called it the tragedy of a national hero. But behind the scenes, cold whispers rose. "That's payback," a former producer told a magazine. "He spent a life talking about light but lived in shadows. This ending was inevitable." As his health got worse, Landon still showed up on television, wearing the old smile, talking about faith and family, words emptied of meaning. "I watched his last interview," Michael Jr. said. "Silver hair, a shaking smile but empty eyes. He was acting in his final scene." On the day he died, thousands of people mourned. They cried for an icon, not the man. "As for me," Michael Jr. said, "I didn't cry. I just looked at his portrait, serious eyes, slicked hair, and thought, finally he's at peace. Only in death did he no longer have to perform." And so the legend closed, not with applause, but with the cold silence between two worlds. One where the public still worships an image, and one where the truth was buried with the man named Michael Landon. He once said, "The worst thing isn't being forgotten, it's being remembered wrong," Michael Jr. recalled. Now looking back, people still remember him, but they're no longer sure whether they're mourning a model father or bowing to a legend built from lies. As for Michael Landon Jr., after 4 decades living under that shadow, he ended his final interview with, "My father wanted to be loved, but he never learned how to love anyone for real. Maybe that's the true tragedy." They laid him to rest among the stars of the screen. But perhaps even that sky grows colder bit by bit as the truth finally comes out. A legend has closed, and behind the light, all that remains is the emptiness of roles that never ended. If this story gave you chills, stirred you, or made you rethink the Hollywood glow, please hit like. Share your thoughts in a comment and subscribe so I can keep bringing you the untold truths behind the legends. Because sometimes the scariest thing in show business isn't a scandal.